Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thanks very much for your prompt attendance. I'll go ahead and take roll. Tricia Wynn, board chair, committee chair is here. Board member Cormack.
Cormack present.
Board member Lawler.
Lawler present.
Great, we're all here. We have a quorum. We're going to go ahead and open up item 5.0 again. And at this point, I will ask the board moderator to go ahead and open up for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment.
Again, if you could keep your comments to the agenda item, which is the IECs. Thank you.
I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in "I would like to make a comment." Also, be advised you only have to request one time. You will get your turn. My screen may look different than yours, but I can see all the requests and I take them as I get them. So if you see yourself in that list as number 2, yet it seems like I didn't get to you till number 5, that's just how you showed up on my list. So I promise I will get to you. Matthew A. would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hi, good afternoon. I'll keep this quick. Ms. Johnson mentioned that the IECs, the evaluation committees, that it's not in their role to diagnose, and I completely agree. They don't have the expertise to do that, and they shouldn't be diagnosing. With that said, I know IECs have been making participants, forcing participants to change therapists, change who their provider is. Sometimes it's been a long-time therapist, somebody who's been a therapist, for instance, who's been with the participant for 3 years in the program, and then the IEC comes back and says, well, we want you to change your therapist to quote-unquote board-approved therapist instead. So I agree it's not in their role to diagnose, but they're essentially doing so by forcing changes of providers and things like that. The second thing is I want to address is Mr. Lawler's question about how much is BRN staff involved in discussions with the IEC members and whether they're directly telling them to extend participants' programs. Ms. Johnson mentioned that absolutely not, I think was her answer. We just quote unquote say make sure they meet Uniform Standard 12. Uniform Standard 12 doesn't say anything about working, doesn't say anything about narcotic access. It just one of the things of Uniform Standard 12 is they should practice safely. So by the BRN staff members telling them make sure they meet Uniform Standard 12, they're not telling them that they have to do work requirement narcotic access, but by saying that they're roundabout way of extending them indefinitely because the BRN staff is saying, well, they have these requirements. So even though they're not directly telling them, supposedly not directly telling them that they need to extend participants, they are in a roundabout way because they're telling them, well, they have to meet Uniform Standard 12, which in our eyes, the BRN staff's eyes, requires work requirement narcotic access. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Janelle would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Yes. Hi, I'm guessing you can hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. At the last meeting, you heard fully grown adults 3, 4, 5 years into their recovery crying while begging for help. You heard people who are feeling powerless and hopeless. That's a dangerous combination for anyone who's familiar with mental health. You're witnessing us being actively traumatized. Our safe space to heal, which had been in the past Maximus and this intervention program, has been absolutely annihilated. These decisions that turned our lives upside down were made and implemented implemented within a matter of hours to days without board intervention. However, to correct this abhorrent hell many of us have been trapped in, it's been close to 250 days with no visible changes. We understand you have to do your work in the eye of the public, as you all have mentioned multiple times. We also understand that our public comments are so numerous and overwhelming that it leaves little time for you all to discuss and make decisions. However, our fear is if we were to ease up on these comments, these issues would not be resolved. The main issues being, however, they're not limited to, is the forcing of nurses to work bedside or give narcotics for what's now becoming and looking like an undetermined period of time. That 6-month time frame is just gone. Mandating a second clinical assessment, which somehow now trumps the many other healthcare professionals' opinions on what a participant who deem them safe to practice. And then there's also CRNAs who are trapped in this program longer simply for having an advanced practice license. And I know that's not on the topic here, but it is something that's important to note. The problem with the changes is the lack of clarity, and for that matter, having anything in writing as to what's required. These changes do not remain the same. Once we met an added requirement, a new one is then added. Lastly, in the fact that we're spending thousands of dollars to be involuntarily extended to meet the needs or the previously made mistakes of the program. To be clear, we are being extended by being denied or removed by our ECs by your enforcement staff. We are being extended by being denied completion to meet the ever-changing interpretation of Uniform Standard 12, as Matt noted. Please note that interpretation is coming from your board staff. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Anthony would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Anthony, *6 or #6 on your phone. Yeah, I'll come back to Anthony. Tony would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I want to first take time to address the participants in the meeting. Hello?
Tony, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Want to first take the time to address the other participants on this meeting, sending you all heartfelt love and hugs. It's our combined voice that has helped give me strength and to keep me going through this process, this trying process. I have seen my reflection in all of you, and I want you to know that we are stronger together than we can ever be by ourselves. If you're interested in supporting one another further and strategizing outside of these meetings, please email anonmaximus@participant@gmail.com. Anyway, so I also want to say that my reassessment was completed and I was found to be safe to practice. So my question is, if the reassessments that have been done on multiple, many of us are saying that we're safe to practice. Now, why are we still being asked to do bedside? Like, it's just like, make it make sense. It's so confusing. Either we're safe to practice or we're not. We were safe to practice and all working because, make no mistake, whether you're doing case management or at the bedside, when you sign RN behind your name, you're practicing nursing. So it doesn't make any sense that our reassessments have been done. And even with that, saying that we're safe to practice, there's still no movement. Again, some of us haven't been our IECs in a year and a half, so, you can't even get in front of anybody. There has to be some sort of transparency. We're kept in the dark. We just don't even know what's going on. It's beyond frustrating. 6 months of coming to these meetings, raising my concerns and issues. I'm still waiting for some clear communication. I'm still required to be 100% compliant and accountable. None of my questions have been answered. Communication has gone silent, and I'm I was hoping to come to this meeting for an update for something, but again, nothing. Be nice to know about these chart reviews that Ms. Melby is doing, how they're being conducted, are they being conducted fairly? And I'm sorry to bring this issue up, but there is a major trust issue here, major, major. We're kept in the dark about everything, and the stuff that's being presented is just not the truth. What you're hearing from the participants is not mass hysteria. We're not just making this up. It's not the truth. So I just urge the committee members to keep asking questions and really dig in to figure out what's going on, behind the walls. We have no advocates, so we're asking, that somebody advocate for the truth and fairness. We're not asking for anything that we don't deserve. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Danielle would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hello. I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. How can we as nurses and the general public have a tremendous amount of faith in any audit conducted by the BRN? This is the same BRN who back in 2018 misled and intentionally falsified a report to the state auditor's office. The auditor's investigation found that 3 BRN executives had created a scheme to mislead state auditors about the caseloads of investigators in this very program. The California state auditor conducted an investigation into allegations that executives within the BRN intentionally manipulated data and delivered a falsified report to the state auditor of California. The investigation substantiated that BRN executives violated state law when they carried out a plan to artificially decrease caseloads for BRN investigators before delivering a falsified report to the California State Auditor's Office. I would like to directly quote from the auditor's investigative report. Knowing that data misrepresented BRN investigators' actual caseloads, one of the BRN executives submitted the falsified report to the state auditor's office with the intent of convincing the state auditor that it had fully implemented the recommendation. As BRN executives anticipated, the state auditor's team relied on BRN's manipulated data and declared the recommendation to have been fully implemented. The executive's actions obstructed the state auditor from making a correct assessment regarding the status of the audit recommendation. The executives also demonstrated dishonesty by intentionally misrepresenting known facts and their misdeeds brought discredit to the BRN. The serious and egregious nature of the executive's overall behavior regarding this matter constituted gross misconduct, end quote. So now, after knowing this, how can anyone trust that this agency, one with a documented history of obstructing an official audit into this very program, with the intent to deceive and defraud, would refrain from doing so going forward in order to save face? I would like to remind everyone that trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. XXXX Dolores would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. For X's Dolores, somewhere on your screen behind possibly something that you have open is a small window that says unmute me. Okay, I'll come back to you. Nurse 99 would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Nurse 99 on your cell phone. It's either *6 or #6. Try the computer. Nurse 99.
Hi,
There you
thank
go.
you.
There you go. Thank you.
I've been compliant with testing in the Maximus program since January of 2022, with the exception of 2 dilute urines for which I was accused of relapsing and required to keep a 90-day food diary. I've never missed a lab or case manager check-in, and still I'm told there's no end in sight for me. My case manager told me that there's no limit to how long I can be kept in this program, and I'm still expected to follow the one-sided contract. At my last IEC meeting, they were 3 hours late coming on to the call and made no mention of it when the meeting finally started. I was not asked one question about my recovery or how I'm doing. There's no talk of transition. I just wanted answer to some basic questions. I've never gotten any answers, and I was told to wait the 10 business days for my new contract. It took 19 business days to hear anything back, and I won't see them again until December. This program seems to be severely lacking in humanity and common sense. If we have followed all the rules, we need to be graduated out. They used to ask questions about how we're doing, how is our recovery. There's no human element anymore with these IEC meetings. When changes are made from the board, we get nothing in writing, but we're told to change what we're doing immediately. Is there a way to improve communication between them and us? And also, did I hear one of you say earlier that the 30 days off of work is no longer effective for a missed drug test check-in? I just want to make sure I heard what you said correctly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Daniel would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Yes, hi. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I just want to share my story from last IEC meeting. After not having an IEC meeting in over a year, I finally had what was supposed to be my last meeting on June 27th, 2024, with IEC committee number 04, which resulted in a denial to allow me full completion of my recovery. I do not feel a full review of my case was conducted, and consideration of all relevant information and any mitigating circumstances were not taken into account during their decision making. I am imploring the BRN to please review my case to the fullest extent. First, my meeting was only about 10 minutes long after waiting almost 45 minutes for them to come up. Yes, I did get emotional, and I don't regret it. I was thinking about my dead sister. I guess they have decided that participants are not allowed to feel any emotions in this program. I have been in the program since September 4th, 2018. I have been sober for 4 years, 4 months, and 5 days. And ever since, I have been compliant with all my recovery, including an IOP program for 6 months, followed by 12 months aftercare, psychotherapy, including EMDR program. I continue to receive therapy. I have a really good relationship with my therapist. I also completed a 42 days inpatient program, which they only require 30, but I decided to stay for 42, followed by 3 months sober living program on my own, and a 1-year aftercare program. I've attended all support group meetings until I was told that I didn't need to. Completed my 15 CEUs relapse prevention program. I had been attending AA meetings as recommended 4 times per week now. About a year ago, it was every single day. I have a sponsor, and I am a sponsor now. I have a sponsee. I think I'm doing pretty well for everything that I have done. I have submitted every single document in a timely manner. I have volunteered at hospice, working as a hospice nurse, with full responsibilities of patient care, including accessing and administering narcotics. I have been cleared by Dr. Carrie Jaffe, which is the doctor that is contracted with Maximus. I have that I have turned in several letters of support, including from my current employer and supervisor. I have turned in letters from my psychotherapist. I have had multiple notes from my notes, just stating what restrictions I have. I have no idea why I'm still here. I was denied on June 27th. I have done every single thing that they have asked of. I am compliant with everything and continue to be compliant. I was not even given an answer.
Thank you for your comment. Mark would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I couldn't agree more with Mr. Elsie's statement. The Uniform Standard 12 is seemingly what's being used to kind of extend participants to meet this safe to practice thing that the IECs have been, shifted towards really focusing on this Uniform Standard 12, which is just says safe practice as a nurse. So my IEC kind of, in our intervention, it determines our entire path, and our ability to communicate with them is really just on a quarterly, biannual, or even yearly basis. And I think a huge issue here was the rollout and the communication between board staff, the IEC, and the Maximus case managers, because there were so many times when we would ask our case managers a question and they would say they didn't have the answer for us. It was up to the board, meaning the board staff, I would assume, not the direct board, the 9-member board. And then that left us in the dark about all these new standards and stipulations that were just kind of whirlwinded and rushed out onto all of us with, no recourse to discuss this with our committees in this time. And the committees were, changed around and the rule structure was redone. And then we were left with this framework of new standards and stipulations with no communication, no official email, nothing in writing, no communication from our case managers about definite term guidelines or what these new requirements were from the board staff relating to Uniform Standard 12 and safe practice as a nurse. So my IEC has determined that for me to complete, I need to pass narcotics for a period of 6 months. Still to this day, my Maximus contract does not say that. It does not say that. It says all I have to do is demonstrate the ability to practice safely as a nurse as determined by Uniform Standard 12 and my IEC. But then I go before my IEC and they say, oh, we can't complete you. You haven't passed narcotics for 6 months yet, but it's nowhere in my official contract or in writing. Yet my IEC tells me that, and it doesn't get translated to any official Maximus documentation. So my last IEC meeting, which had been, a year before my previous meeting, lasted about 10 minutes. The committee was solely focused on my quote unquote requests. They seemed to be very rushed to get me in and out of the forum as quickly as possible, and it lacked any sort of humanity to it at all. They just ran down my list of requests, said, we'll consider this, this, and that. You'll hear from us in 10 business days. 18 business days later, I got my contract and I was informed of all of my requests being approved or denied. So there's no conversation or there's just such a lack of humanity with these IECs now that is such a stark difference from how it was 2.5 years ago. And these IECs can have both. They can make sure we're safe to practice, but they can also hear our story of being in the program and being in recovery and our requests. And they have just lost that feeling.
Thank you for your comment. Nurse 23 would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
I am a participant since March of 2021. At my last IEC meeting in June of this year, the committee was a different committee, not the same committee that has been following me since I started this program. My case manager is also new as of this year, not the same one I started with. I have been 100% compliant with my requirements, even found a narcotic access job in February. After working in dialysis, which supports my recovery, to satisfy this new requirement, and still I was not considered for successful completion. Not being consistent with IEC committee members and case managers is setting us up for failure. Instead, at my last IEC meeting, my initial complaint that brought me to this program 3 years and 4 months ago was sent back to the investigator with the DCA, even though I have been sober over 3 years and compliant. My last IEC meeting was ran 100% by the board members, not the IEC members. IEC members did not participate in my meeting, which lasted 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Not one question was asked by them regarding my recovery, how I'm doing in my recovery, how this new Access job is going. Nothing. It is no longer about recovery. It seems more punitive. It seems more towards probation. They're not worried about our recovery. What we've been doing so far, 10 minutes for a meeting that I thought I've been doing everything they've asked for, have been 100% compliant, and not one question on my recovery was asked. Not how I'm doing, how the new Access job is going, even though it doesn't support my recovery process. It's just overwhelming. It's frustrating. We're all frustrated. We're all overwhelmed. And we thank you for hearing our stories and our complaints because it's very unfair. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Millie would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. I was committee up. I was on an IEC committee for the full 2 years. And the last 6 months of my term, I hated attending the meetings. I absolutely love this program, believe in this program. And the two major changes that I feel occurred that have this miscommunication fiasco going on is one, we used to, when a participant came and we'd hear them at their initial committee, they would be assigned to one of the 5 members. And that gave them someone to connect to when they came to the meetings, knew this person kind of had their back at least. And then the second thing was we used to talk to the nurses in their meeting. We all could ask questions, and then they left so that we could discuss their requests, and they came back in, which is very therapeutic. They could come back in and say, okay, we heard what you said. We don't think you're ready to return to work. We're going to, you're making good progress or you're not making good progress. We'd like to see you in 3 to 6 months. That left the building. And I feel that that's a big, big mistake. Me and other members on my committee, we tried to say, you know, from a clinical approach, this is wrong. This is wrong. It's scary for those nurses to come and look at 6 and 8 strange faces and not be able to have any feedback. And how now all we would do is say, okay, thanks for your request. You'll get a response in 7 to 10 days, which wasn't always happening. I feel like the intervention committee, the IEC committees have been kind of thrown up under the bus and painted negatively during this meeting, that we took it serious. My number one charge was to protect the public. And being in the intervention program, you protect the public because as soon as they say they want to join, we say, okay, you can't work until you're seen. And no one's ready in 3 months to return to work unless they had a DUI about 3 or 4 years ago and they were doing recovery on their own. But we never, in my 8 years, told a person at their first committee meeting that they could return to work. This is so sad to me.
Thank you for your comment. Anthony would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Can I be
Yes, sir.
heard?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Anthony, we're
Anthony,
not able to hear you at this time.
there you go.
All right,
Thank you.
there I am. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
go ahead.
My comment about the IEC is some people have had their last one in November and December of last year, where they've already met with them for the past 3 or 4 years, where their contract has been completely fulfilled. Every requirement has been successfully done. When a lot of these nurses were supposed to be able to get out anywhere between January to March, then they were told, well, you're not going to be able to see your IEC committee no more. And when these nurses said, well, why? Well, because there's no requirements. And then they're saying that either they have to pass narcotics for a certain amount of time or do bedside, or sometimes both. There was no complete understanding on what's the requirements to complete this program. Now some of them are getting back to their IEC committees in a year. So they haven't seen them every 3 months like what's been said. Some people it's been over a year. Now, if they were unsafe to practice without during this past 3 or 4 years of being in a program, they would have been told that before. But all of a sudden, something has changed drastically since December of last year. And that's this requirement to pass narcotics or to do bedside. Some of these nurses have been working as nurse case managers and other aspects where they're not comfortable being bedside. A lot of them have bodily injuries. They might have back fusions. They might have shoulder strains, rotator cuff tears. So to make them be bedside, that's not safe for the public. To make them pass narcotics when a lot of them have had narcotic issues is not safe for them, and it's not safe for the public. So that's all I'm going to say for now.
Board
And
moderator, if you're speaking, we're not able to hear you.
Anna would like to make a comment.
Oh, thank you. You know, first of all, this is a taxing, grueling process. It's excruciating. It's uncomfortable for everybody. It's going to take a lot of time, and as it should, because these changes are not just minimal changes. They're changes that are impacting the livelihood of people and their families. And so yeah, it should take this amount of time. It should take this amount of people coming on here to say the same thing over and over and over again. And I appreciate everybody on here who actively listens and is hearing us. And I know there's a lot of background work, but in the meantime, everything is going on as it's always been going on for the last 10 months. You know, there's a lot of background work, but people in the program are still being asked to go on as usual. Anyway, case managers are vital to communication between participants and Maximus. And there has been an incredible turnaround of people and case managers. Some participants have had 4 case managers in the last 6 months, and that's in direct correlation to the changes being made because there's no clarity, there's no structure. There's really nothing to hold on to for participants. Case managers are on here saying that they've left because of these changes. So that in and of itself should speak volumes. You know, if the people working for the program aren't staying, because there's no clarity. I mean, what organization is okay with that? And you know, I appreciate everybody on here that has talked, and I appreciate people, you know, on the board and in Maximus, you know. This is not an easy thing for anybody, but things need to change for clarity, transparency. People aren't robots. You're dealing with people, with families, and of course, public safety, which is number one. But all of that has been achieved for years. And then in the last
Thank you for your comment. Courtney Ivy would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Thank you. Wow, I want to make a few comments about the discussion regarding issues surrounding the Intervention Evaluation Committee. I have sat over the years, I have sat on probably 3 or 4 different committees. The way we operated was, again, as per the Nurse Practice Act, we as a clinical group were evaluating the nurse. We're evaluating the stages of development in recovery and determining when that nurse was in fact safe to practice. What I've noticed that's happened in the last couple of years is a couple of major changes, which is really frightening. Number one, the IEC, not participants, the IEC committee members no longer make the decision about when a nurse will be seen again, about that the nurse should be seen by the same IEC committee for consistency, no longer makes the decision about the final contract that will be sent to the nurse, no longer makes the decision that they are allowed, not even allowed anymore, to speak up and ask questions of the nurse, nor are the nurses allowed to ask questions. It really is a tragic approach to what the board insists on calling recovery. The other concern I have is that the new method of the program manager and the chief reviewing the documents of what the committee came up with for suggestions used to be done at the committee, at the meeting itself. Now what happens is everything goes to either Miss Johnson or Miss, I'm going to mispronounce it, Pabla, and the nurse may not receive the answer and the new contract for up to a month. There's something gravely wrong with the program since 2022 and the combination of these 3 programs under one chief. I think it needs to be looked at. I agree there are issues with Maximus, but we solve problems in a collaborative spirit.
Thank you for your comment. XXX Dolores would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. For X's Dolores, you have to hit unmute me on your computer. There's a window behind something open on your screen that's going to say unmute me. Okay, I will come back to you again. David would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. David, on your cell phone, it's *6 or pound. There you go.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for taking this time to listen to everyone's comments. First, I would like to say I'm very grateful for the program. Now I would like to make a comment. I would like to ask the committee to vote on change regarding the 30-day removal from work when missed check-in or dilute urine transpires. There also been talks that they're reviewing prior testing and now they're retroing people out of work for 30 days, which I don't understand either. You know, one of the questions I have is what's the metrics showing these people actively relapse when they simply miss a test? My guess, the metrics are very small. Removing someone from work for 30 days, even though they've been in the program and haven't had any issues for say 2-3 years, our work pool to select from is already very shallow. And you remove someone from work for 30 days, I guarantee you that person is going to be let go. They're going to be fired. And it's not just 30 days out of work. It's 3 to 4 months following that trying to find another job. And then it's another 3 to 4 months after that trying to get credentialed at that job. So at minimum, you're looking at 6 months without work, all because someone just failed to check in one day. Maybe they had a stressful situation in the morning and they were late to work or whatever the circumstances. But to remove someone from work for 30 days is catastrophic. And I would really ask the committee to vote on immediate change regarding this. Why can't they just ask the participant to go test the next day? I mean, why do they have to be removed from work for 30 days? I just don't see the metrics substantiating the removal of someone from work for 30 days. The other thing I would like the committee to look at is the metrics tied around someone getting full privileges back to work. From what I'm understanding, it's taking an individual participant a minimum of 2 years to get full active work restrictions removed. And I just think that needs to be shortened. Again, I'm grateful for the program and I thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comment.
Excuse me, before we take the next public comment, I just want to reiterate, although I very much value public comment, we are on an item that relates to the IEC. And so we ought to keep all of our public comments on this item to that subject. Thank you very much.
M would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
I've been in for 2 years. I was granted non-patient care, non-narcotic access last year in April, but wasn't able to find work until last year in December of 23, where I have been working in a non-patient care role since then. I haven't had a DEC meeting since October of 2023. I was put off because I was told by my case manager that they wanted me to work in that role for at least 6 months prior to seeing me again, which would have been, I believe it was in June. So my track was, you know, April could have been a DEC meeting, and then again, July would have been a DEC meeting. So I was scheduled to be in a DEC meeting in July, which got put off again until October because of a missed check-in that I had in May. Prior to that, I had had full 100% compliance in the program, never had any dilute urines or issues with my lab tests. And I actually tested the very next day, was selected for testing the day after my missed check-in and tested negative. I was off work for 30 days. And my question, I guess, would be, I heard earlier it was stated that for intervention participants that the 30-day off work for a missed check-in is no longer a thing. I was wondering when that came to be and why it's still, as of July 9th, when they pushed back my DEC meeting to October, why it's still being counted against me as, you know, something where I can't go in front of the board and ask for patient care privileges I don't know that this information is getting communicated to Maximus. Or the other thing too is I was told that because I was off work for the 30 days and that I missed turning in paperwork once in the 2 years on time, that those were the reasons why they pushed my deck meeting back another 3 months, which is going to delay the progression of my program with patient care privileges and hopes to graduate. So I just wondering, when these changes are made, if they're being communicated in a timely manner to the case managers so that they can implement them with the participants, and how that works. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. LH would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hi. First of all, I just wanted to say I do empathize with the board. This is a grueling process, listening to 112 participants sharing their emotions. This is our only chance to have a voice, and I know you understand that. And it's no wonder there is such a disconnect. It's us participants to our case managers and compliance monitors, then to the program manager, then to the enforcement division, to Ms. Johnson, to the board staff, and then finally to you guys. So there is no wonder there is such a huge disconnect. And it makes me wonder if perhaps there is room for something like a participant advocate who could have our ear and also yours as a intermediary and go-between, so there is not such a disconnect, or perhaps a subcommittee that has involvement from all areas, including participants. I don't know if that's something that we could consider in the future, but I think it would benefit both us and you as the board staff. I also want to address a misconception that I heard Ms. Johnson state a couple of times about there being the majority of participants in intervention being new to recovery. I don't think that is necessarily true. Myself included, I know several other participants who had already been in recovery for months to years prior to entering the program. I had been in recovery for 2.5 years before entering the program. I had documentation from an addiction specialist outlining my compliance in my program, my years of negative drug testing. None of that was taken into consideration when I entered the program. I had the exact same program outlined for me as a participant who started the same time as I did, who had been sober for 1 week. So there was no differentiation there. So I just wanted to clear up that misconception. I also just wanted to reiterate what other people are saying. There really needs to be a more robust cross-check and balance of the interpretations of the uniform standards by the IECs. I heard that there was some checks and balances, but I do not think they are robust enough, because they are kind of being interpreted differently by every IEC, and interpretations and the new requirements being put onto participants are not necessarily aligning with the progress of that participant. There's no precipitating event or occurrence that is requiring that a participant should need additional therapy or additional requirements, yet it is being blanketed across the IEC. So I would just love to see a little bit more robust cross-check of how IECs are interpreting the uniform standards and making sure that they are just and reasonable interpretations. And I just would really hope that you again are hearing us and hearing what we're saying. I had my second clinical evaluation as required.
Thank you for your comment. Alec would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
It has been broached before, but I just want to reiterate, the board has admitted that Maximus is paid per participant. Therefore, they are incentivized to, in conjunction with the board, extend the time frame for nurses to complete probation programs indefinitely in order to maximize profits to the tune of $5 billion in annual revenue. I don't understand why this is tolerated, and my question is there any way to contract with a company whose revenue is not tied to the number of patients in the program? I'm not a nurse, but having listened to hundreds of comments during this meeting and the prior one, it seems to me that Maximus is reaping unfairly high profits from the state of California when nurses are kept in the program indefinitely, no matter how long they've demonstrated that they've recovered. This obviously does not serve the public interest, nurses especially. They're evidently having to continue with drug testing with little to no clarification as to why, despite having met all requirements of the program and having tested cleanly for at least a year, thereby demonstrating recovery and no longer posing further risk to the public by reasonable standards. So they are trapped in the program for longer than necessary at great financial cost, which is punitive and unfair. It exacts unnecessary trauma on the nurses, and that is immoral. Furthermore, taxpayers outside of the nursing profession are not seeing their tax dollars optimized if the state contracts with an agency that reaps higher profits and absolutely necessary to meet its mission to the public. The retention of Maximus seems to benefit Maximus above all, not California taxpayers or the nurses who sacrifice so much to get back into good standing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right, one more person. XXXX Dolores would like to make a comment. Go ahead. Dolores, are you there? Dolores, you unmuted yourself. Are you able to speak? Committee Chair Wynn, what would you like me to, let me try this one more time. XXXX Dolores, can you unmute yourself again?
Board moderator, is she able to type something into the chat that we could read?
She's typed in, she's had two questions. Where are the rules of the intervention program? And where are the written program procedures? Is that good enough?
Yeah, I think that's I think that's good enough. E.O. Melby, can you answer that question?
I can refer her at least to the statutes and regulations, which are the legal authority governing it. In the Nursing Practice Act, the article, the statutes in our Practice Act relating to the intervention program are at Business Professions Code section 2770 through 2770.14. So if you were to search, do a web search, that should come up pretty readily, or you could go to the leginfo.legislature.ca.gov website where that's all publicly available. The regulations, I'll just repeat that again, by the way, Business Professions Code section 2770 through 2770.14. And the regulations regarding intervention are at California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Division 14, Article 4.1. So that's 16 CCR, Section 1446 through 1449.
Thank you very much.
Additionally, there are the Department of Consumer Affairs, they post the uniform standards. If they just did a quick Google search that said DCA uniform standards, it'll pop up. It's a 29-page PDF that is accessible on the web. Also, when the participant joins the program, they get an agreement that outlines every single step, how what their requirements are, what the time frame is for returning signed documents, what happens when all these things occur, and it's very spelled out in that. And so I will also request a copy of a generic agreement that participants get, and I'll bring that forward with the copy of the contract at the next board meeting.
Thank you very much, E.O. Melby.
Thank you. Committee Chair Wynn, there are no other public requests for comments on the WebEx. I am told there are no public requests for comments in Sacramento. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. And thank you very much. I know your job doing this is challenging, so thank you. I think a lot of really great comments were heard, and we will take them all, into consideration as we decide how to move forward. I had two very quick questions, and then I'm going to ask committee members if they have questions. The first is, again, back to this safe to practice reassessment. I'm wondering, maybe Shannon, if you could tell us, is that a pretty standardized? I mean, are there like 12 things you look for in the reassessment on safe to practice? And at the same time, if you could tell us if it's the same for both probation and for intervention.
I know they were having some audio issues in Sacramento, so I just want to make sure we give them a chance to queue up and be able to respond. I know they were trying to access for an audio connection.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
I
we
can,
can.
Shannon. Thank you.
Okay, great. So it's a little different. So the assessment that's done on the intervention side, it's more of a bubble, yes or no, with some narrative that can be added on it. There is a specific question towards the end of that assessment that asks, are they safe to practice? Yes or no? And then some narrative can be added in that. On the probation side, we have a completely narrative history that is provided fully with, family history, drug history, alcohol history, criminal history, any physical ailments, that they cover, but it's all narrative. So the two reports are very different.
Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. And then the second comment that came up that really kind of piqued my curiosity was this board approved therapist. Like, if I have been seeing somebody for quite a long time, would I be asked to change therapists in the middle of my recovery program to get a board approved? Or is there an opportunity for the therapist that I've been seeing to become board approved?
So what I have seen at the IECs is, say, for instance, someone is been seeing a therapist for mental health, only mental health, or a family marriage therapist for a certain aspect. And the committee has thought, well, they really should be seeing someone for substance abuse disorder, or vice versa. They're seeing someone solely substance disorder, but they're dual diagnoses. And so the committee's like, they really need this aspect of their therapy. And so they have asked that they obtain someone within that arena expertise to have the therapy. And again, it's been very different for each participant. It's not blanket. They look at what their diagnosis is and their care plan and what kind of treatment they're getting. And so that's how they have handled it within the meetings.
Thank you. That's helpful information. How about committee members? Any questions or comments after the public comment? Yeah, go ahead, board member Cormack.
Chair Winna, I was just like waving as much as I could. Thank you. Okay, thank you. That was one of my questions as well. So two things with respect to the interaction between the IECs and the program manager. The first is we had multiple comments that it was taking, so it's supposed to take 10 days after the IEC meeting for them, okay, that it was 18 to 19 days. So obviously you all heard that. We'll take a look at that. It's supposed to be 10. We also heard a comment saying it never used to be like that. Am I correct in interpreting that the reason it is now not automatic is that the program manager is reviewing each of these recommendations from the IECs? Yes. Okay. So this is a change, and this process exists for a reason, to provide more consistency and oversight across the IECs and the state. Okay, that makes sense to me, and I can see how it would be, I can see how people are wondering why that's changed. Next question. Can the BRN program manager overrule an IEC recommendation?
Yes, they could.
And has that happened in 2024?
No, I don't believe it has. The only change.
BRN program.
Yeah, I'll
Sorry,
just
I
share
can't
with.
see you, so I don't know when you're talking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you turn on the camera? Sorry. Oh, I'm not manning my camera, so I apologize.
Sorry.
There we go. Are we back? You're not in it. Oh, there I am. Hang on. There I am. I had to move around because of this background.
Okay.
So the only things that we have added is, so the notes are taken by Maximus. They provide us those notes and the voting, the rationale, the discussion, and then we also have notes. And sometimes there's discussion points or discussions that maybe didn't make it on the notes, or they did not capture the motion correctly on the vote. So we just make sure that that is accurate. And there's usually 4 or 5 sets of notes for every IEC. So we really have a good realm of, exactly what happened and occurred at those meetings. So that is the only changes that have been made to any of those recommendations by the committee. There's not been any change in a care plan. There's been no change overrode as far as employment. There has been nothing like that as far as the IEC recommendations.
Okay. And then we've heard a bunch of things on the 30-day removal from work for a missed check-in or dilute urine sample. And
Yes.
I guess thinking about this, there are places where we have, a zero tolerance policy. For example, there are schools that have a zero tolerance for guns in schools, like that's it, you're expelled, right? So is it I guess this is sort of an open-ended question, right? Is the philosophy of the intervention program that we are zero tolerance, or is there grace for what I'll call one, a missed check-in or dilute urine sample, and then the consequence comes the second time something happens? Which are we?
So it's been different in the past. In the past, a missed check-in, meaning you simply missed calling into Vault to see if you needed to test or not. If you had failed to do that, you were removed from work. We have recently asked Maximus to not remove them from work. However, they need to be discussed, because if you look at the violations for non-compliance for either a major or minor violation, it really depends. There's an analytical aspect to that you kind of have to look at. Is it just one missed check-in and there's been no other issues testing? Is there a lot of out of ranges and dilutes? Did they have a recent positive? So it really needs to be looked at in totality to see, are we now at many minor violations, which now would result in a major violation? And then what are the consequences? And I had heard someone talking about, being able to go back before the 30 days, but the fact of the matter is that they have to test negative for at least a month of continuous drug testing before they're allowed to go back to work. And that's based on uniform standards for the consequences of removal from work. A positive test or a missed test rises to the level a little higher than just a missed call-in.
Right. And how clear do we think that is to participants today and all of the Maximus compliance monitors and case managers?
In my opinion, how clear it is to them, it's probably clear as mud. I don't think that, I agree with some of this. I really think the communication needs to improve. I think that a lot of information needs to be shared with the participants that maybe is not being shared.
Okay. And I think this is not I'll just say from a philosophy standpoint, I would be interested in having some suggestions, recommendations from experts in the field about whether or not it should be a zero tolerance policy, or whether or not, some grace should be allowed. And I don't know the right answer to that because I'm not an expert in addiction. And I don't think we should be making that decision here today. I'm glad that participants, hard though this is for you as well, are letting us know that there's some confusion and that it seems like a really strong consequence. I can also imagine a scenario under which people say it's a required consequence for people to adhere. I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm glad that we flagged that the communication around this needs to be improved. And I'm sorry, someone was trying to say something.
Yeah, I was going to jump in real quick. It is this is addressed in the Maximus contract with the DCA. There's an entire section that talks about missed check-in, missed drug test, that the contractor shall review the random drug testing report each business morning to verify any participants have failed to check in for their random drug testing, and if any participant failed to test as required. If a participant failed to check in daily or failed to complete his or her random drug test as required, the contractor shall electronically notify the RPM or EC consultant on the same day, as well as perform the following. And for missed check-in, it says the CCM shall verbally and electronically notify the participant the day of receiving the notification of the participant's missed check-in to notify him or her that they failed to check in for the random drug testing, to gather information on the reason for the missed check-in, and to notify the participant that he or she is removed from practicing until negative drug screens are received. If the CCM determines that removal from practice requires consultation, the RPM or EC consultant, prior to notifying the participant that he or she is removed from practicing, the CCM shall verbally contact the RPM or EC consultant within 1 hour of notification of the missed check-in, and then contact the participant within 1 hour of speaking to the RPM or the EC consultant. Otherwise, the CCM shall verbally and electronically notify the RPM or EC consultant of the occurrence of and the reason for the missed check-in on the same day notification of the participant's missed check-in is received, and shall discuss and provide his or her recommendations and any remediation plans to RPM or EC consultants. It goes on to another couple options there. Then it talks about missed drug tests, and it talks about worksite monitor notification. There's also a section that talks about whether or not they're unable to contact the participant. And so there is clear guidance in the contract as to how each one of these are used and worked. BRN is in alignment with that. We did not have that as a call out that we did anything different from what the other 8 boards and bureaus under this contract did. There is a board specific section that we do have some variances from other boards, but it is very clear, and the person is notified, the participant is notified within an hour on some of these specifications, and there's a whole policy around if you can't get them. The other thing is that Jenny has shared with me in meetings, and Jenny, please, you're on the call, feel free to step in and speak up at any point. There are times when, and she's served in this role, as she shared with me, that they call in and say, I just got off work and I'm rushing to a site, I can't get here, I can't get in. And so that is not considered a missed check-in, but they have them test as quickly as possible within like a couple hour, I think it's 12 hours, 24 hours, I can't remember. As long as like the contact is made and the discussion is sought, and they're trying to seek and find alternatives to that. So Jenny, I could have quoted that incorrectly, but if there was any kind of variance where I led the board committee members here astray, please redirect, as I'm still trying to learn this process. But my first thing was just reading that contract front to back, and there's some very clear guidance already in there. And Jenny had also provided some background on that contract was made through many people that have worked within mental health and worked within substance use disorders, and those recommendations that went into the contract for the 8 Healing Arts Board under DCA had very clear recommendations because of these things. So Jenny, I'll open it to you real quick to see if you can shed some light.
Yeah, there are many layers to this. First, I'll say that when the uniform standards were reviewed in 2019, this specifically was reviewed by the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee. And I testified to this issue because it's been an issue for many years that our participants can't find a collection site or and it's on my slides coming up in a few minutes, if they work 7 a to 7 p and they get off of work, or they start at 7 a.m., there's nothing open, they get off at 7 p.m., there's nothing open, where do they go to test? If they've been selected that day, because we require them to test on the same calendar day that they've been selected, or if it's a holiday or a weekend. And some of the opponents to making any accommodations to our participants testified in that setting that we're not here for their comfort or their convenience. And so there were many people testifying from other programs in other states and other parts of the country saying other programs don't do it that way. You know, they don't have testing on the weekends and holidays. They don't require testing when a participant can't get to a collection site. They'll accommodate it. And the decision was made by the coordination committee to leave it as it stands. And so if you're going strictly by what the uniform standards say, the participant can be tested on any day of the year, and it's a random selection, and we don't have any leeway to make any accommodations, but we do our best to go ahead and make accommodations anyway, because it's impossible. So the issues that we encounter are timing, as I described, having a same gender collector for observed collections, because it needs to be a male for a male, female for a female. And there's not always someone on duty when the individual shows up to go for their collections. And so we have some procedures that we've created to accommodate that, some mitigation around that. They'll do a monitored collection, and we instruct the participants to call us from the collection site so that we can instruct the collector on what to do in that situation. And they do what's approved by the Department of Transportation for a monitored collection, where they can stand not directly in the stall, but just outside the stall, perform the monitored collection. So there are a number of issues that come up related to testing and collections that interfere with the ability to get the collections done the way they're prescribed by the standards. And I've taken myself way off track here. So remind me, what was the original question? I've gone way down the road here. What was the original question?
It related to the 30 days.
30 days. 30 days removal from work.
Yeah.
For a missed check-in.
Yeah. So our original requirement was, and has been for a long time, to have participants be removed from work. And that's what our contract, I believe our contract has always said, and our procedures have been to remove somebody from work for 2 negative test results. And then to demonstrate that they were not intending to avoid testing by not calling in. So because we have no way of knowing if it was truly an accident or an intentional not checking in. So we don't know that, but we get 2 negative tests to show that they're negative and let them return to work after they've been able to demonstrate that their tests are negative. So 2 negative tests. And then further discussion and interpretation of the uniform standards and further discussions with the board staff was that it's a failure to test, that failure to call in was also interpreted as a failure to test. So that's how that came about, that 30 days.
Can I just ask a follow-up then? So I heard if you're removed from work, you're off for 30 days because you need 30 days. But then I just heard from you that you only need 2 negative test results. So which is which situation is it?
Well, there are 2 parts to that. The uniform standards say when you start the program, you have to have 30 days of negative tests before you can return to work. And so they say that for a major infraction. So if it's a positive test result, if it's a failure to test, if it's a major infraction, they require 30 days of negative tests. So it's whether or not the failure to check in was considered a major infraction or a failure to test is where that interpretation came in. In the
So
past,
today, yeah,
right.
today, if someone fails to check in this morning, are they removed from work and
So
for how long?
as of this past week, we've had conversations with the board staff and we've agreed that we will consult the board staff, talk about the individual case, their test history, their compliance history, and whether they've had prior missed check-ins or missed tests, and make that determination based on the individual case history. So they will be initially removed from work until that determination is made. An example is we have one that occurred yesterday, and that case is being taken to the next available committee, which is, I believe, in a few days. I'm not exactly sure, but the next available IEC committee to review the case and to make that determination of how long that person will be off of work before they can return to work. We had another one also come up yesterday, and that person had a relatively clean test record, no other infractions, no other missed calls, and they were allowed to return to work. So again, that decision was not made by Maximus, but that in consultation with the board, and it's being made on an individual case basis.
Thank you very much.
Board Member Cormack, do you have any other questions?
I do not.
Okay, how about Board Member Lawler?
All of my questions have been answered, and it seems everyone's aware of my comments. Nothing's changed since the last board meeting, so I'm ready. We can move on.
Okay, okay, great. Thanks very much. So we're going to go ahead and close this item out, unless E.O. Melby, would you like to go over kind of what we hope to accomplish before the next meeting?
I'm hoping I got this one. This one was kind of all over the place for me, so I just wanted to make sure I have that. So copy of contract, copy of a sample agreement that the participants get to be posted for the next board meeting. To get the report of the safe to return to work in advance so that can be addressed prior to going to an IEC meeting, so they don't have to wait for the IEC meeting to discover that and then push that forward. How can we ensure that the IECs operate consistently so that if they are having to bump to a different IEC meeting to get seen, that that is has a consistent expectation. We did kind of go over and discuss some of whether or not the IECs can order, whether they can ask them to change providers. And I think we just need more information on that, whether it's a change provider or add provider. It's different if you're being told completely to change everything that you've established, but if you have a specific treatment at one therapist for this, you may need an additional treatment at a more specialized therapist for something more. One of the things I did want to share that I talked with Maximus about, and I wrote that down to kind of share here, is an update to their system. So if they do get granted the contract and is renewed, that there was a suggestion made that any of the changes that were done to the agreement have it noted where that changed from. Was that an IEC recommendation? Was it a program manager recommendation? Was it a therapist or a provider recommendation? Where did that recommendation come from? Because right now that's not able to be found in the notes or the records of, unless it is specifically written in on a narrative of where that was. And so that was one of the suggestions so that we can find out when someone says I had a change and I don't know why or where it came from, where that was. I think that was it. Did I miss
That
any?
seems like my list. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and close item number 5.0 at this time and open up item 6.0. Again, information only. This is a discussion regarding the Maximus Clinical Case Manager turnover and vacancy rates, roles and responsibilities of the CCM and compliance monitor, protocols for returning intervention program participants' IPP calls, assignments of IPPs to the IECs, and testing site locations and challenges. Ginny, this has your name written all over it. Are you going to take the
It
lead
does.
on presenting? Okay, great.
I am.
Thanks very much.
I think I have, moderator, can I share my screen instead of, let's see, try that. There we go. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do that instead of do my own advancing here. So first I'm going to talk about Maximus overall in the organizational structure. So the first thing I want to respond to one of the public comments that, well, two of the public comments that were made about the multi-billion-dollar company that Maximus is. And that's true. Maximus is a very large, publicly traded, multi-billion-dollar company, but we are a very, very small component of that. So we are approximately 12 and a half full-time equivalents and a total of about 13 full-time equivalents in that company with about 13.5 thousand employees. So we make a little tiny corner of the world. And of that, I want to also mention that we're under contract with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And so our revenue is capped by the contract. And yes, we're paid per participant per month, but we don't really have any way to increase that amount or inflate those charges beyond what the contract calls for and what we're limited by in the contract. So I wanted to make that clear. We're also going to talk in a few minutes with Vault, and I want to make it clear that there's no money exchanged between Maximus and Vault. The participants pay Vault directly for the testing. We don't have any money between Maximus and Vault. There's no money exchanged between the support group facilitators and Vault. So the participants pay the facilitators directly, and we pay the clinical assessors directly, but there's no revenue coming to us for that either. So the revenue that we get is only the administrative fee that is the per participant per month fee. And we are not involved in the decision to keep participants any length of time in the program. Those decisions are made by the committees, and we're not a voting member in those committee meetings. So I felt like I needed to make that statement and clear that up. The testing frequency is made by the uniform standards. That 52 to 104 times a year is mandated by the uniform standards, and the frequency is determined by the committee, and we carry that out, or Vault carries that out, not something that we benefit from either. Okay, just felt like I needed to make that clear. This is our organizational structure internally. We have a couple of additional positions. We have an administrative assistant that answers our phones full-time, and we have some support staff that are part-time in multiple departments. Like we have a quarter of a full-time equivalent that supports us in human resources, and we have quality assurance, and we have finance. And so we have a number of other portions of positions that are supporting us, and others support positions, but these are our primary positions in the recovery department. We have 4.5 full-time equivalents of case managers and 4 full-time equivalents of compliance monitors, myself and our operations manager, who's Kristen Suarez. And of those 4.5 clinical case manager full-time equivalents, 0.75 of that is people that are part-time and help us fill in and cover our case managers, like a per diem position, what you might consider a per diem position in a typical healthcare setting. So Maximus doesn't really recognize them as per diem, but we use them like you might use a per diem position in a hospital. And I'm sorry that this is small, but I was trying to get a lot of information in a single page here. So the roles and responsibilities of the clinical case managers. They manage, this is the clinical side of things. So they manage the participants through their period of participation in the program. They monitor overall the compliance from the bigger perspective. Oversight of recovery activities. They make recommendations for treatment and liaison with the board, and they carry out those recommendations for treatment as recommended by the clinical assessor, the IEC committee, and make sure that appropriate types of treatment are happening. They conduct remote telephonic assessment and reassessments of the licensees to reevaluate their status and overall compliance with the program requirements and their progress in recovery. They are responsible for talking to the participant weekly until they're seen by their first IEC recovery meeting, and then monthly after that. Sometimes the IECs are requiring more frequent than monthly meetings, like twice a month or weekly check-ins. So the case manager is responsible for conducting those check-ins. The participants are considered compliant if they make the attempt to contact their case manager during the business hours, to get in touch with their case manager for their check-in. Participant is compliant, the case manager makes the attempt to return the call. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes when I talk about telephone call protocols. But there's a weekly contact when they start, and then it goes to monthly. And then the case manager is also responsible for kind of being the liaison between the lab, the treatment providers, the facilities, and we'll often talk to treatment providers or counselors at facilities if there are issues or concerns or questions about treatment. And if we get a positive test result, we'll call if we know somebody's in treatment, and we'll be that liaison there to talk to them about what's happening in treatment. Respond to incoming calls on the toll-free line, and we have somebody on call 24/7. It's me this week. So we always have somebody on call for holidays on a rotating basis, and we take turns with that. So between the full-time case managers and myself, we rotate being on call. If you look on the right-hand side, this shows you our turnover and vacancy rates, and I keep hearing about the high rate of turnovers. This goes back to January of 2023. We've turned over 3 full-time case managers in the last year and a half. We've turned over 3 compliance monitors in the last year and a half. We don't have that many, so it feels like a lot. But 2 of those case managers, well, one retired. There was one left in July, and she's, where is she? I think there should be, okay, yeah, one left in June of 2024. She left for personal reasons. And then the one that left in May and the one that left in February are the 2 that have, to some extent, left because of their concerns about the changes in the program. So that first column on the left is the case managers that have left their positions. So I misspoke. None of the case managers have left to retire. Of the compliance monitors, the one that left in January retired. The one that left in February moved out of the country. And the one that left in September, I don't remember. I think she retired. So those are those 3 positions that left. They were all filled right away. We kind of joke about our positions. We call it the Hotel California because many of our employees have left and come back. So we say it's, you can check out, but you can never leave because many of them are returning employees. Several of the people currently employed in the program have returned or held positions as committee members. and then come to work with us as case managers. So 3 of our current case managers have held positions as IEC committee members or done both at different times in their careers. So that's our vacancy and turnover rate. We currently have 0 vacancies. The compliance monitor is responsible for evaluating the overall. It's more of the administrative side of things. So they're responsible to evaluate the incoming information, the documents, from facilities, participants, the labs, monitor the progress, make sure that the participants are following their agreements, reviewing the data in the history and profile reports to ensure that the accuracy going to the committees, because that's kind of the primary document that the committees have to review. It's a living document that summarizes everything in one place. And so the compliance monitors are responsible to make sure that everything in that document is current and up to date for reviews for those committee meetings. They work on issues where the situation and the data requires review of relevant factors. And they're responsible for providing everything to our quality assurance and monitoring and evaluation of the program. And they are also responsible for our internal quality control. So we have a 2-step process: quality control and quality assurance. So quality control is internal, quality assurance is a separate department. It's not handled through recovery. And so they monitor us separately. Turnover and vacancy rates. This is the same thing that I described for you in the chart. I just put it on a graph because I thought that that was a little bit more visual here, that you can see that those vacancies weren't happening all at the same time. We did last summer have 2 of our compliance monitors were pregnant and on maternity leave at the same time. They had their babies at the same time. So we did have a dip in our compliance monitors over the summer of last year. We filled it in with 2 of our retired compliance monitors came out of retirement and worked with us through the summer to fill those vacancies. One of them is still a per diem employee and comes back and forth and works with us from time to time. So we kind of hang on to those positions as we need them. So the next section I'm going to talk about is how participants are assigned to the committees. This is changing because we're having some very active discussions with the board staff right now about how we're going to continue to assign people to IEC. So I'm going to talk about that as we go. So this is the past, and I'm going to talk about how we're moving into a little bit of a change. In the past, we would analyze the participant's home address, the location of what committee meetings are in those locations, the total enrollment of each individual IEC, and each IEC should be limited to 40, that's per contract. And then the number of participants that were scheduled for the next meeting agenda of each of those IECs. There were at one point a total of 14 committees across the state. We're down to about 10. We've had to close or shutter some of the committee meetings because of our declining enrollment. The next step was to identify the appropriate committee based on that analysis in step 1, meeting availability, and then a completion of the clinical assessment and recommendations of the clinical assessor regarding the participant's need for treatment. And then if the participant's not in an inpatient treatment program, to get them assigned to the next available committee meeting. Contract requires it within the first 3 months. We try to get that as soon as possible and schedule the participant to the next committee meeting that meets the location, the availability, and within 3 months of the intake. What we've been talking with the board staff about is how we can do that sooner. We've talked about maybe creating some IEC meetings that are just for intakes, bringing people in. We've talked about, because participants don't come, ever since the pandemic, they don't come in person anymore, that maybe we're going to be able to assign people to committees that don't have to be geographically located near their homes. Because we're changing the locations of the meetings, they're not scattered across the state like they've been in the past. We've sort of narrowed down meeting locations that it doesn't have to be as close to their home locations as it's been in the past. And so where we assign participants can be a little more flexible than it's been in the past. And so we're looking at the assignments in a little bit of a different way. So it'll allow us to assign people a little bit more quickly to the meetings because we have a little bit more flexibility in where they can go to the next meeting. We've also looked at within the last week where the assigned committees are very heavy with assigned participants. We have one committee that has 43 participants assigned to it in LA because it's big, obviously a bigger city. And we have some that have 25 assigned to the committee. So we can do some shifting and moving people from the LA to the smaller group and move people so that they're better able to get out on the committee schedule sooner. And we won't have to have 2-day meetings, and we'll be able to get people seen more quickly. So that's how the committees are assigned. And then I'm going to talk about the protocols for returning the phone calls. Contractually, we're required to have a person staffed between 8 to 5. So we have an administrative assistant that's full-time. She's on the phones Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We maintain that 800 number that's dedicated to our phones. They must be answered by a skilled live person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So when Julie, our administrative assistant, isn't on the phones, then we use AMCOM. It's AAMCOM, which is an answering service. They have a live operator that answers after hours, or if Julie's sick, we cover with our compliance monitors. If for some reason we're all in an all-staff meeting or there's some reason why we can't assign the compliance monitors to the phones, AMCOM covers them. On holidays, same thing. AMCOM covers the phones. And then the last bullet point there on the left is we maintain a call log of people calling with interest in the program. So people that are asking to join the program, if they give us identifying information, we keep that in a log. So we have that available. So I've said that we have the administrative assistant or the compliance monitor responding, the answering service. We train the answering service, and in fact, my annual training is Thursday of this week, so I'll be providing that training again to them. And it's regarding substance use disorder, chemical dependency in general, because they don't really understand that as much. And so we talk about what the program is, what chemical dependency is, how they can work with their families, what it means in the world. I talk about HIPAA. I talk about our program, how to triage calls, how to handle urgent and emergent calls. They have scripts for them, as a typical answering service does. And so we review those scripts twice a year, make sure that they're correct. We had something come up in the last few weeks that have indicated that there are some issues with the scripts that aren't correct, and we're working on getting that figured out. And then we meet with AMCOM leadership monthly to look at their QA scores and also to discuss any issues that have come up in the past month with any calls. And so we troubleshoot anything that's come up in the last month regarding their phone calls. And we deal with those issues right away. So this is kind of the flow of how the calls work. So during business hours, it's the administrative assistant answering calls. They're triaged. If they're urgent, they go immediately to the person that's assigned, the case manager assigned. If that person's not available, it'll go to the on-call, because the on-call case manager during the week for after hours also covers during business hours. So since I'm here today at this meeting, another case manager is kind of keeping an eye on urgent calls and covering to pick up today because I can't pick up on-call calls today. So we use Teams a lot. We message each other. We have a Teams chat going all the time where we pay attention to that. And Julie would put something in the message saying, I have an urgent call. Is there another case manager available to pick up? Somebody else would pick up that call. Monthly or weekly check-in calls that are routine, that gets routed to the case manager if they're not available, because they often are on other calls or doing other things. The call is placed in a call log. The participant is notified at that time that they're considered to be compliant if they're attempting their check-in, and the compliance monitor may assist us with check-in calls if they're routine. If the participant isn't having any significant issues, we have a checklist for that. It's a biopsychosocial assessment. You know, do you have any significant issues that we need to know about? Any changes in your financial, medical, legal status that we should know about? How are your meetings going? We'll kind of run through, you know, any changes that might affect your recovery. Tell us how you're doing. So we'll run through a checklist on the check-in calls and see how they're doing. If they have a specific request, the call is routed to the case manager if they're available, and if not, the call is placed in their individual file, and also then it goes into the case manager's case log. So it goes into two places. So their individual case file has a note that they've called. And then we keep, as I mentioned, several part-time case managers on call. And they help us. There are these part-time per diem, part-time per diem case managers, and they help us return calls when their caseload is impacted. So you heard some of the callers say that it wasn't even my case manager that called me back. Well, because that's what we do to make sure that people are getting responses. They're fully trained case managers. They also have experience in substance use disorder or psychiatric nursing positions. And they help us return calls and make sure that people are getting the attention that they need. And so we have 2 other case managers right now that are doing that work to help us out. After hours, the calls go to the answering service. They're triaged. They're routed to the on-call case manager. If the on-call case manager doesn't pick up, they try again in 20 minutes. If there's no response after the second attempt, they call me. If for some reason I don't pick up, it goes to our operations manager. If the operations manager doesn't pick up, it goes back to the on-call. If not, it'll route through other case managers whose names they always have on the list until they get somebody, and they keep calling until they get an answer. Level 1 is urgent emergent, which is a risk to safety or recovery, injury, or hospitalization. And that's an immediate transfer of the call. Level 2 is an important call. That would be a lab testing issue, new medications, new diagnosis, medical issues, or if they're having to miss support group for some reason. It requires a transfer to the on-call case manager, but it's typically something that we can't really do anything about, but we'll take a message, we'll put a note in their file, we'll answer their question. Level 3 is a routine call. It's just a simple question or a check-in. Most of those they'll hold for the office in the morning. And so those are the ones that we go over with the answering service to make sure that they really were level 3 calls, go over them and make sure that there isn't anything that was missed or inappropriately not transferred. In the morning, we get a fax from the answering service. They get faxed to the office, and every morning our administrative assistant distributes all those calls to the assigned case manager, and they get those first thing in the morning. So they know who called overnight or over the weekend, and they know they can respond to the calls. They go into their call log. And then the testing site, this is regarding the testing site locations and challenges. So our contractual language is that the collection site shall be located within 50 miles of the participant's address of record or work site and approved by the board, RPM. If a laboratory is utilized for drug testing, it should be open at least 5 days a week during normal business hours. And as I mentioned, that might not be enough because the program requires testing any day of the year. If labs are not open on weekends for testing, the contractor must utilize field staff to perform observed testing on the weekends when necessary. We recently had an IEC where the committee was surprised to hear that we used field staff or mobile testing. but it's perfectly acceptable, and they're trained for Department of Transportation guidelines in collections. Should a work schedule conflict prevent a participant from going to his or her regular testing site, the participant can call us and request an alternate site, or they can call Vault and request an alternate site. Vault has somebody on call after hours also. And the participant's responsible for allowing enough time to test before the end of the day. And I mentioned, though, that's not always possible because sometimes they work 12-hour shifts. And under no circumstances shall the contractor or Vault give permission to a participant to abstain from testing unless it's approved by the board. In the past, it was also the EC or EC consultant that could approve that. But as we've been talking about, and as we mentioned earlier, it was determined that that was an authority that the EC didn't have. So that was written into the contract, but it probably shouldn't have been, because that was something that the EC shouldn't have been permitted to do. Spiel collectors are very expensive. That is an additional cost that is beyond the normal collection fee of $30 to $50. So and I don't know, maybe when Sean comes on and speaks in a few minutes, he can tell you what those costs are. I don't know exactly. I would say they're probably, or maybe if the public calls in, they can tell you. I would guess they're $150 to $250 for a field collector. I think they're very expensive. We now have available video collection using oral fluid testing. I mentioned this in the board meeting a couple of weeks ago. It's all done. Participants' hands have to stay above on camera at all times. They do an oral swab, put it into the packet, and seal it up and put it together for mailing. But they can do now an oral fluid collection on video. We also have available a blood spot for blood testing for alcohol. And that's also can be done by video collection, same process. And then I mentioned Maximus doesn't receive any payment in any form for drug testing. Collection sites. Sean is going to go into more detail about this, but I wanted to mention there are 373 total collection sites in California, 58 counties in California, 49 of them have collection sites. There are 9 counties that do not have collection sites, and Sean's going to show you a map, so he's going to go into more detail. I want to mention that the challenges are in remote locations like up around Eureka, up in the northwest corner, northeast corner. We run into problems. Many sites are closed on weekends and holidays. It's sometimes difficult to find a same gender collector. They're not always on duty. Participants working 7A to 7P. The cost of field collection is high. Collection errors on forms and during procedures have been an issue for us. We try to remind participants to read those collection forms before everything gets sealed up and make sure everything is checked correctly, because that becomes an error and then they can't use the sample. So they have to make sure that everything is correct. And it's the collectors that are usually making the errors, but the participants have to make sure before they sign it that they're correct. And that there are long waits to collection sites, resulting in the participants needing to void before the time of collection, and then they need to drink more water to produce a specimen, and then the specimen is dilute, or what we call out of range, which means that it has a low creatinine level or a high fluid level, and that's we question that it's out of range. It becomes a problem in the validity of the test. So that becomes a problem. And I think that's my last slide. And then I'm going to turn it over to Sean. And it's up to you if you want to ask me questions first, or you want to go ahead and hear the rest of drug testing from Vault. So I'm open to questions.
I would just as soon hear from the next witness, and then we could, we might have questions for each of you. So thanks very much for that presentation, Jenny. Thank you.
Let me stop sharing if I can figure that out. Okay. Where's my stop sharing? Moderator, can you take away my, oh, there it is. I got it. Okay.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for having me come speak. I'm Sean O'Neill. I am the Compliance and Privacy Officer for Vault Workforce Screening. I also am the lead for our recovery monitoring solutions. which the contracts with Maximus and the Board of Nursing come under. Board moderator, are you able to share my slides, or is that something I need to do?
Yeah, if we don't have it, you can do it.
Okay.
Go ahead and what is it? I think you just have to right click and share your screen.
Yeah, it is preventing me from doing that due to a setting.
Hold on here. Let me see. Let's try this. There you go.
All right, thank you. If we can go to the next slide. So I wanted to start by talking about who Vault is. Vault, we are a third-party administrator for drug and alcohol testing. What that means is we bring all the parties together to support a drug testing program. So that would include the clinics, that would include mobile collectors, that would include laboratories who process the specimen, that would include the medical review officer services, device providers, and so forth. We bundle all of that together to provide simplified billing versus having all of these vendors bill independently. As mentioned, we do have staff available 24/7 to assist if challenges do come up with testing. And we have been providing these services to the public for over 30 years. I've been asked to talk about the challenges with clinics and the work that Vault does with clinics. So when we have a customer like Maximus or the Board of Nursing, we set up a specific clinic network for them, and I will go into the criteria on my next slide. Our database has over 17,000 clinics nationwide. So these are clinics that Vault has an agreement with that we will look at adding to specific networks if they meet specific criteria. We also will ship supplies in advance to clinics for hair and blood testing. This is to reduce any errors that may happen at the clinic for not utilizing or having the right kits on hand to do that specialized testing. Next slide. So as mentioned, there are 373 collection sites in the Maximus network, and you can see by the map where the collection sites fall from a county level and where the density is. Building a collection site, there are a lot of factors that go into it. First is obviously the area and location needs. Where will testing be occurring? Where are the participants located? Where do they work? We try to find collection sites within 50 miles so that there is an opportunity to test at the site. We also have to consider the labs that clinics will work with. Not all clinics will work with all drug testing labs. So we do have to take a look at those that will work with the labs that are in the contract with the Board of Nursing and Maximus. We also have to look at the services that they provide. Not all clinics do drug testing. Some clinics are more focused on urgent care. Some are more focused on occupational medical examinations and not necessarily drug testing. Not all will provide testing for the different specimen types. Just because a clinic does do a urine drug test does not mean that they will also do a hair or blood drug test. So we have to take a look at what clinics are available for the different specimens. It was mentioned that a challenge with clinics is not always having the same gender available to do a direct observed test. There is another challenge that not all clinics are willing to do direct observed tests. There are some clinic networks that is just not a service that they provide. So that does not make them available to us to add them to the network. We do take a look at hours of operation. We take a look at the pricing and payment terms. Some clinics want the payment for the collection to be paid same day. Some clinics will work with a third-party administrator and allow us to pay for the collection on behalf of the participant. That is the structure that we have set up. Vault does receive the invoice from the clinic for the collection. We pay that, and then we have a flat fee for the collection that is bundled in. Not every program does it that way. We do also work with programs that require the participant to pay same day for the clinic fees, and those fees are not controlled by Vault. They would then be controlled by the clinic, and so budgeting for that and cost control can be a challenge. So the way that has been set up is Vault pays for the collection fee and then bundles it in to put some controls in place to manage those costs. We also look at performance and quality. We will remove clinics for performance issues. When there are issues, whether discovered by Vault or whether reported into us by the board or Maximus, we do have conversations with the clinic. Our account managers or individuals from our medical review office will follow up with clinics, whether that is requiring retraining, whether it's requiring a written statement. We do manage that with the clinics. And then also we have to take a look at chain of custody management. Some clinics will hold paper chains, some clinics will not. We also look for clinics that will do electronic chains of custody. We find that using an electronic chain of custody does reduce the number of errors that have to be corrected, which can delay the drug test result being reported back. So talking about nights and weekends, this is a challenge to find clinics that will work nights and weekends. Taking a look at the current clinics assigned to the Maximus network, 32% of the clinics do have hours of operation after 5 p.m. That is compared to our national average, which is 24%. So we are seeing a higher percentage when we look at Maximus's network compared to our entire 17,000 clinic sites. 24% of them do have weekend hours. This is a little under what we see for our national average, which is at 32. If a participant is selected and they cannot find a clinic, we do have staff on hand 24/7 that we can try to find them a site that either is in the network assigned to Maximus or is another network that we may have available, or if we have to, taking a look at mobile collection. Mobile collection tends to be the last option we want to go with because, as mentioned, it is a higher cost in pass-through fees. And yes, those fees can rack up very high. Fees can be paid for mileage, fees can be paid for wait time, fees can be paid for no-show. Fees can just be a service call for the call out. So those fees rack up very quickly. So we want to utilize that as little as possible to help control some of the costs. As mentioned, we do also offer virtual monitored collections. And at the end of my slides, I will talk more about what that process is. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, there we go. Thank you. We also have clinics available to support travel. So we do have clinics in all 50 states that are assigned to Maximus to assist with travel. So if a participant does have an approved travel request, we will look at where that participant is traveling to identify a clinic in the network we've established for Maximus so that they do have a clinic available if they are selected for testing under travel. If we don't have one assigned to Maximus in the area, we will look at our other clinics in the database to see who we can identify to perform the testing. If testing would be hair or blood, we do make sure, again, we ship kits out to make sure that there are no issues when it comes to those special testing. And again, our 24/7 staff is available to help if there is an issue that is encountered while a participant is traveling. For holidays, we also work to support testing on the holidays. How we do this is we take a look at the tests that have been randomly selected coming up on a holiday. We start calling clinics to validate if they will be open for holidays. And we work to identify a clinic per person selected so that we have that in advance so that testing can occur on the holidays. We work that list right up to the last business day to see if there are any changes. That list is provided to Maximus. We will identify if there isn't a clinic available within 50 miles to determine if we want to do a mobile collector, again, trying to avoid those fees, or what other direction should be taken. And along with holidays, we make sure the clinics have the supplies if it is a hair or blood test. And the clinics that we do identify, we share with our 24/7 support shift so that if a participant calls in, we're able to assist them. Next slide. And then my last slide is talking about virtual monitored collections. This was mentioned in Jenny's presentation, and it was mentioned earlier as remote testing. This is something that we did build coming out of the pandemic to continue testing while clinics were closed. I will say VMCs are a good addition to a testing program, but they should not replace testing that does happen at a clinic. It's a good add-on alternative, but it shouldn't be something that replaces all testing at a clinic. Currently, we can do virtual monitored collections for oral, nail, and blood spot specimens. How this works is if a participant is approved to do virtual monitored collections, they would have to place an order with Vault for the kits. We do send kits in packs of 10, which allows for 5 tests. Collections occur through Vault Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And we do have collections on Saturday and Sunday from 11 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. The collection takes about 20 to 25 minutes, and collections can be conducted anywhere that would afford the participants some privacy so that they are not interrupted during the collection process. What happens if a participant is selected, they go online to schedule a same-day appointment with our virtual collectors. They are randomly assigned to a virtual collector. They are not able to choose who they test with. They will receive a virtual link to a meeting just like this to meet one-on-one with the virtual monitor. At the time of collection, both the monitor and the participant would connect through the meeting. The monitor instructs the participant on how a collection occurs, instructs how that hands have to be visible the whole time. The work surface where the kit is sitting has to be visible the whole time. No one else should be in the room. And the collection is monitored from start to finish, from opening of the package of the device all the way to the specimen being sealed and put into a shipping container. And then the participant is instructed that they do need to drop that specimen off within 24 hours so that it does get to the lab in a timely manner. That is the information I have today. Thank you for allowing me to share it.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions, and then I'll open it to other committee members, and then we will go to public comment. So Jenny, could you tell us what the caseload, you might have told us, but I forgot to write it down, the caseload, you know, the number of cases that each case manager would have and each compliance monitor would have?
So contractually, they're required to work as a team of case manager, compliance monitor team. So they're assigned together to maximum 130. And the requirement is if a case manager exceeds 100, they have to be assigned a single compliance monitor to work with them. Right now, their assignment is around 90.
Okay.
Give or take. It's really, most of them are under 90.
And is that the right number, do you feel, that the 90? I mean, 130 seems like a lot, but I mean, with a check-in every week.
Right. And they're not checking in every week. So they're checking in monthly for the most part. They're only checking in weekly when it's, they're new in the program.
Okay.
And they're managing them as a team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say 130 is high, but that's what the contract allows. And when they get to that, it's pretty tough. 90, they're able to manage it.
Okay, so we did hear a lot of public testimony on the phone calls at the last meeting, and maybe we'll wait and hear, what the public has to say, but did seem like people said we call, don't hear back. I hear you said everybody's trained and, we have quick handoffs and stuff. But anyway, that's been on my mind. It's hard to a program like this. We insist on so much checking in. And then when they go to check in, they don't get responses. But we'll wait to see what public comment is today.
Well,
And then finally, I just like to encourage you to, further build out this remote testing, which does seem like a pretty good, I agree, it doesn't need to replace, in-person testing. I understand completely accountability and all that, but 50 miles is a long way to have to drive to do a test after you've worked a shift or on a weekend. I just hate it being so kind of burdensome. I understand the need for it, but if we have opportunities to lessen the burden, I'm all in favor of it. Again, as an add-on.
Yeah.
So thank you both very much for your presentations, and
Oh,
I'm
you're
going to
welcome.
open it up to Board Member Lawler or Cormack for questions.
David, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, I will. I'm looking over my notes. I don't know if they're questions or comments. I've had a problem since our last board meeting with the idea that Maximus knows their participants are nurses, and yet they chose to use Vault, which doesn't seem to provide the time or the place to accommodate nurses. The idea of them calling in so you can help them find a place is a great idea. Would wonder though if you're ever able to find a place for them when they're working not just a 12-hour shift, but are only available off hours from 7 at night until 7 in the morning. It seems to me that if you need clinics or testing collectors on weekends and after hours, that you'd be able to go out and find that, even if that means using someone else besides Vault. My other issue is, Mrs. Matthews, you showed us the very last slide, the collection sites for random drug testing, which absolutely laid out reasons why there would be mistakes in the collection, because of the people who work at the testing facilities, as well as a diluted test result based on how long a person would have to wait. So it's not a mystery why those things are happening, and yet the consequence to the participant doesn't change, as if it's their fault that some tech in a clinic screwed up the collection or made them wait so long they had to void beforehand. You would think your rule would change to accommodate those mistakes, and you would think Vault would be willing to retrain their people so they collect the way Maximus wants them to. There's not really questions. There really are just comments. And I would just think, knowing what you now know from the public comments you've heard for the last 3 meetings, it will, I hope, inform some of the changes you make or requests you ask others to make to better accommodate the participants. There's a whole other side of this story we've never heard that I'm sure would help explain why some of these things are happening to these participants that either they're not sharing with us or our staff hasn't been able to share with us. So maybe I am speaking in ignorance, but I got to tell you, it just seems fixable and it seems manageable. And I'm stunned that this is allowed to go on, because burdensome is the nicest way I can put this process right now, based on all the information we've been given. So I'm sorry I'm not more positive about it, but it's having been a manager and having run businesses before I became an educator, I'm just surprised we're not using more common sense. That's all. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lawler. Ms. Cormack.
Thank you, Chair Wynn. And I was remiss earlier in not thanking staff and here Maximus as well. This is the first time we've gotten slides in advance of the materials. And I know I asked for that last time, and I do appreciate it. It's made it a lot easier to sort of absorb the information. So I'm just going to go in order of the staff report. And I am very grateful for the level of detail that Maximus has provided, because I know I learned a lot going through this. The compliance monitors, are they operating on a proactive or a reactive basis? And by that, I mean, do they sit down and go through everybody's file once a month, or do they get flags about things that are not going well?
It's really both. So we have a notification system, so they get a flag as documents come in real time. So there's that happening, but then once a month they go through and look for I'm sorry, lost the word, but they put together the compliance so that they look at it for the month and make sure that everything is pulled together. Sorry, I've lost the word that I'm looking for, but yeah, so it's really both. And then if a non-compliance comes to our attention during the course of the month, we contractually, we have 5 days to respond to that and notify the board.
Okay. And then I see that you reminded us that the clinical case managers are registered nurses licensed in the state of California.
Yes,
Okay.
we did have one that just recently left. She was a licensed clinical counselor, and she was with us for not quite a year, but yes, they are all registered nurses at this point.
Okay. And now moving to this section, this is on page 24, where we talk about the IECs. And this is, it says the agenda is limited to 17 participants each day. So we've heard people talk about, there's just 10 minutes at the IEC meeting for themselves. If there are 17 on an agenda, the committee also needs time to, talk about those, right? So any light you or Ms. Johnson can shed on, reconciling what's required with what's happening.
Well, Ms. Johnson looks at that. I'll say that we never get to 17. I think we usually have about 10. I can look and see exactly how many we have in a day, but it's never 17.
Okay, well, that's something that's probably, there's probably, I so appreciate what Board Member Lawler said. I'm sure there's some things we don't understand. We're not being, it's not that someone's preventing us from getting the information, but it's possible that a 10-minute check-in potentially makes sense. I don't really know, but if it's been a year, it certainly seems like more than 10 minutes might be useful. I noticed it says that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we allow 30 to 45-minute time slots for each participant. There's some discussion that occurs before and after the participant enters the room, so they each get an assigned time slot.
So the committee is spending time on their case before and after what the participant, sees as a short time. Okay, that's helpful. It says on page 25 that drug tests are scheduled by computer on an annual basis, and the frequency can be updated if that changes. So there's some report that's run, and then there's some I don't know. And then every day it pops up and you're told. So there was an accusation, there was a concern during public comment that perhaps people had been asked to test today so that they were not able to attend this meeting. But is it your contention that whatever tests were asked for today were scheduled at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, as the participant enters the program, the tests are scheduled, and maybe Sean can answer that even a little bit better than I can, but I think I understand it. They enter the data into the system. It plans it out for a year, and it looks at number of tests per month and then number of tests not to exceed so many per month, so many per week, so that it gives it the parameters, and so many per year. So it'll look at, for example, 52, not to exceed 3 to 5 per month, and not to exceed, one to 2 per week. And so then within those parameters, the computer schedules them out for the whole year. And I looked at, while we were on a break, we had 26, I think, scheduled today, 26 people scheduled in nursing to test today. And that's about average. We had 22 yesterday, and I picked a random day in June, we had 30. It wasn't
Okay.
any more today than any typical day.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. I think it's important for all of us to understand how the schedule works, and it's not directed by a person.
We do have the ability to add a test for cause. We absolutely have the ability to add a test if they have if the participant has a positive test or missed test, we can add a test to their schedule. But the test schedule as it stands is determined by computer and set randomly for the year.
Great. Okay, that's helpful. I so appreciate you providing all of the information about the turnover and vacancies and when they occurred. And I think you shared an awful lot of information about your employees, more than I think was required in public, about why they chose to leave. But, in the past 15 months, 2/3 of the clinical case managers have left their positions. And that can either be a sign of one scenario is there's a problem in the program and, people don't want to work there anymore, and so they choose to leave. Another scenario is, we have decided collectively that we need to enforce certain rules that had not been enforced. And so now we're doing that, and the person might choose to leave. I'm sure there are other scenarios as well, but it does seem like a high number. And I think you provided us with a reason that is plausible. I can certainly also understand why participants might see that the person to whom they feel most connected, the person who's been helping them, is leaving the program, and how does that make them feel? So I think both things actually could be true at the same time. And I just wanted to touch on that. And all right, next thing I wanted to talk about is the assignments to IECs. And thank you for, and I hope I'm sure the public is hearing that having these meetings, having this level of discussion is prompting review by BRN staff and by Maximus. So, the process is definitely working, although I'm sure not as, quickly as everyone would like. Considering an intake-only IEC, I don't know enough about addiction and recovery to know if and mental health issues, if that's it seems like that might be an interesting way to go, especially if there are people who specialize in initiation of treatment. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And I guess the part about geography being relevant is, from an efficiency standpoint, perhaps it does make sense to no longer take that into consideration. I don't know enough about the program to know if IEC members being able to, bring to bear their own experience with providers who are making recommendations or providing information. I can see that from an effectiveness standpoint, it might be a little bit more the expertise that they have developed in their, in their region might not be put to bear. So, but I think at this point we are in let's try and get this fixed quickly. This might be an area where, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not going to say a straw poll, but or a survey. I believe there is a survey given some input from prior participants or current participants, how would they think about the trade-off? Would they rather be with, you know, the same IEC all the time, or would they rather be seen more quickly? And it's not for me to say what the answer is, but I'm glad you're asking those questions. On terms of the video collections, how do participants learn about these options? So for the folks who are not on this call today, are they aware of these options, or are they stressing themselves out because they don't know how they're gonna be able to comply with a certain schedule?
I think there's still some stress going on. It's a fairly new process, and as we've had some participants have difficulty testing weekends, holidays, we've suggested to them that we can make this video collection available to them going forward, so that if they're in a remote location, it's going to be easier for them going forward. So we're really rolling it out to them in the last, I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So I think it's really becoming available. They're probably becoming more aware of it in their support groups. They're hearing about it in these meetings as we talk about them. The case managers are talking about it a little bit more now and making it more available. It's new.
Yeah, I guess I'm hoping for something that's more official and comprehensive, and I don't know if that's an email or, you know.
We can put a blast. We use the Vault, you know, because they have to check in every day. We use the Vault system to send out messages to them that we know they'll get on a daily basis, like a marquee message that we can give them that we know they'll see. And so we can put a message there and explain it. We'll do that.
Great.
We can do it within the next couple of days.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then my final questions are all around the testing. Again, I apologize for my lack of understanding of some of these things. What is oral testing for? What are the things they're testing for if they use the oral method?
It's similar to the urine test panel, so it's a general test panel for multiple substances.
Okay. And how is it decided whether folks are doing a hair, a urine, or a blood sample?
The blood is an alcohol test with a larger window of detection. So a longer window of detection. So it depends on if we're looking for alcohol. And if there is a positive urine test for alcohol, we'll often do a blood test to look farther back or to look for more, it's a little more sensitive. So to look for alcohol in the blood.
So then that would be one of the ones that you would add if there was a positive urine test?
Yes.
And then, go ahead.
There's a random, it's built into the random collection once a year, one time during the year. Hair and blood is random during the year.
Okay.
There's, I don't know that Sean talked about this, but the cost of the testing is a bundled cost so that they don't pay anything extra once during the year for hair and blood. It's all the same cost for any test that occurs during the course of the year on a random basis. If it's added, the cost will be extra. So if it's added for cause, it's a higher cost and it's the full cost of the test. But for example, if we're talking about 52 during that course of the year, whichever test is occurring, it's the same price. It's averaged out so that the cost can be planned and can be reasonably expected, and it averages out so that it's manageable. And it hasn't changed in 5 years.
I'm going to say it's predictable cost.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long does it take for folks to get the results? And do the results go to Vault, Maximus, BRN, participant all at the same time?
Participants do not get their results. We tell them if it's a positive result, we call them and we talk to them about it, but we don't give them the actual result. we measure time from collection to lab and lab to reporting. Lab to reporting is on average about 2 days. Collection to lab is about a day and a half to 2 days as well, because they send it by FedEx. So total overall is about a 3-day turnaround.
Okay. Interesting. So no news is good news if you're a participant.
Yeah, yeah. But they can, and if they're concerned about a test, they can certainly ask us and we'll let them know if it was positive or not.
Okay. And then finally, Mr. O'Neill mentioned approved travel requests. And we see this sometimes on requests for early termination of probation if the testing requirements are, we see this as a request. I'm not going to make any comments about that. But what is an approved travel request and who makes that decision? I guess the scenario I'm imagining is you live in California, you're in this program, and your mother dies in another country, in another state, or is sick, and you want to go. How does that work?
So that would be an emergency request. So whenever possible, we ask for advance notice. We ask for 3 weeks notice if possible when they're planned. If it's an emergency request, obviously you can't do that. Somebody passes away or there's somebody's sick. But and it's not that we approve the travel, because we can't restrict somebody's ability to move around. But what we ask for is that they identify how they can remain compliant in the program. So are they able to identify meeting locations, either if they're attending 12-step meetings or community support groups, are there locations for meetings, or have they identified that they'll be attending meetings remotely by Zoom or however they're attending their meetings? Are they continuing to attend their nurse support group meetings? Have they identified collection sites? So if they're selected to test while they're traveling, do they know where they're going to go for collection? Which is why we ask for advance notice. It gives the lab some time to find collection sites for them in their destination. They can go to test if they get selected, and the lab has identified that. They can send collection supplies to the lab in advance, and they can go and get tested if they get selected. So it's not that the travel itself is approved, it's just that the plans are able to be made. And then we ask the participants to do a relapse prevention plan, thinking about where they're going and what their concerns are with the trip. Are they visiting family? Are there triggers? Are there, are they going back to some place where they started using or where there were issues, in their history that might be a concern that they need to face or think about related to that? And we ask them to kind of be prepared for that before they go.
Okay, that's all very helpful. And then my final question that we haven't covered today, we did talk about the IECs and they're run under our intervention and enforcement group as part of BRN. What about the nursing support groups? Are those run by Maximus, or are those run by the BRN itself?
No, they're independent. They're run by nurses. Many of them are graduates of the program. Many of them are nurses that work in the field of substance use disorder or psychiatric nursing. But in some way, they all have experience working with the program or working in recovery or in recovery. And so we vet them. They fill out applications, and we know who they are, but they're independent.
Okay, that definitely was not clear to me until today. I'm sure this was review for many people, especially the folks who are in the program who are calling in and listening. But given the importance of these costs and the way that they're being implemented, I appreciate the time spent on understanding that better.
Sure.
And Sherwin, that concludes my questions and comments.
Well, thank you both very much for your thoughtful comments and questions. I really appreciate it. I think it's really moving this for all this really helpful information. So it's 3 o'clock and we're going to open for public comment, but I just want to temperature the room. Should we take a 10-minute break right now and we wouldn't have to open up we wouldn't have to disturb public comment? Okay, so we're going to take a break for 10 minutes, come back at 3:10. We'll immediately open for public comment. Thank you all very much.